The first cold snap of fall hit Maple Ridge like a warning shot. Wind howled through cracked windows. The neon sign outside the Junction Café flickered like it might give up at any second. Inside, grease popped on the grill, and the scent of burnt toast clung to everything: skin, hair, dreams. At 5:57 a.m., Elena Brooks shoved open the back door with her hip, arms full of napkin rolls and regret. Her boots slapped the linoleum floor, still wet from a rushed mop job. The diner was nearly empty, except for a drunk asleep in booth 4 and the hum of the refrigerator buzzing like a warning she couldn't decode. She didn't say much. Never did. But every morning she showed up. Same faded green apron, same quiet nods to the regulars. To most, Elena was invisible, a ghost in the morning routine. But ghosts don't cry in walk-in freezers, and Elena had, twice this week alone. What kept her here? It wasn't the paycheck, barely enough to cover rent and her overdue electric bill. It wasn't the stale coffee or the clattering plates or the corporate manager breathing down her neck. No, it was a boy no one else noticed. A boy who never ordered food, never spoke more than 3 words, and sat at the same booth every morning at exactly 7:10 a.m. And this morning, something about that silence was about to break. Because Elena didn't know that the simple act of feeding a stranger was being watched. And she had no idea who was about to walk through that door. But before this day was over, everyone in Maple Ridge would know her name. The bell above the door gave its usual tired jingle as the early light spilled into the diner, grey, muted, like the world hadn't fully woken up yet. Elena Brooks moved behind the counter with mechanical grace, her hands working on instinct while her mind swam elsewhere. She filled coffee pots, wiped down the chrome edges of booth tables, reset napkin holders. But her eyes, sharp, searching, kept flicking to the last booth by the window. He was already there. Same oversized hoodie pulled low over his forehead. Same threadbare jeans that didn't quite reach his ankles. Same too big backpack parked beside him like a wall between himself and the world. And the same glass of water sitting untouched in front of him. It had been 6 days, 6 mornings of this quiet ritual. No menu, no order. Just that book, always the same one, open on the table, pages bent like they'd weathered a storm. Elena dried her hands on her apron and moved toward him, her footsteps soft against the linoleum. In her hand, a warm plate of scrambled eggs and toast, still steaming. When she stopped beside his booth, she didn't speak. She just placed the plate down gently, as if it had been meant for someone else. "Kitchen made extra," she murmured, eyes never quite meeting his. "Would be ashamed to toss it." The boy didn't move at first, just stared at the plate like it might vanish. His fingers hovered above the fork, but didn't grasp it. Elena turned and walked away before he could say no, or worse, run. She returned to the counter, pouring a cup of black coffee for the trucker on stool 3. Her peripheral vision locked on the booth in the back. 10 seconds, 15. A hand reached out, grasped the fork, a bite, then another, then it was gone. The next morning she did it again, pancakes this time, no explanation, no expectation. The morning after, oatmeal with brown sugar. The day after that, hash browns with a single sausage link. The boy never said thank you. Not at first, but he kept coming. And she kept serving. It became their secret choreography, a dance of invisibility and hope. She never asked his name, never pried. There was something in the way he sat, angled slightly toward the door, always watching the window, that told her questions would break whatever fragile bridge they'd built. But others noticed. "Who's the kid?" muttered Ray, the ex-contractor turned coffee philosopher. "He yours or something?" Elena didn't answer, just wiped the counter harder than she needed to. By week 3, Sandra pulled her into the back, arms crossed, voice tight. "You keep handing out free meals, Elena, and corporate's gonna come breathing down our necks. We don't run a shelter." "I pay for it," Elena replied flatly. "From my tips." Sandra's gaze softened, but only slightly. Still, it sets a precedent. Elena thought about the radiator in her apartment that hadn't worked in 2 winters. About the dentist appointment she kept postponing. About the unopened bill on her kitchen table. Then she thought about the boy. The way he looked at his food, like it might disappear. the way he sat a little straighter now, the way his eyes had met hers just for a second 2 days ago. She straightened her apron. It's a precedent I'm okay with. Outside, the wind scraped dry leaves across the sidewalk. Inside, a child ate breakfast in silence, and a woman who had once been invisible became something else entirely. Someone who saw hunger not as a burden, but as a signal flare. And neither of them knew it yet, but that small act, that quiet, unwavering decision, had already changed everything. By the start of week 4, the quiet kindness had stopped being invisible. It was no longer just Elena and the boy, Isaac, trading silence for survival. The diner had noticed, and so had the world outside. It began with a photo. Someone, probably one of the morning regulars, had snapped a picture of the untouched plate of pancakes Elena left at the boy's booth the morning he didn't show up. No context, no names, just the image of a warm breakfast going cold across from an empty seat. It went viral overnight on a local Facebook group, captioned with bitter sarcasm, "Rosie the waitress feeds ghosts. Next stop, free meals for imaginary friends." The comments were brutal. "Bet she's pocketing the food. This is why small diners close. Bleeding hearts giving away what ain't theirs. Feeding strays just makes them dependent. Where's this kid's parents anyway?" Eleanor didn't respond, but she read every word. She told herself it didn't matter. She'd endured worse. Loneliness, loss, poverty. They left thicker scars than comment threads ever could. But then came the call. 2 days later, Arnold Whitman, district supervisor from the corporate office in St. Louis, walked through the diner's front door with the arrogance of a man who confused policy with wisdom. He wore a pressed grey blazer and a scowl that looked like it hadn't left his face in a decade. He didn't order anything, just asked for Elena. She found him in the back office, fingers steepled like a judge preparing a sentence. "Elena Brooks," he began, not bothering with introductions. "I've been reviewing your recent shift reports. There's an alarming amount of overages tied to your hours. Food waste, unexplained orders, irregular register discrepancies." Her chest tightened. "It's not theft. I cover the cost. From my tips." He leaned forward, his voice dropping. "Doesn't matter. You're still operating outside protocol. Feeding an unidentified minor with no guardian on the premises. Do you understand the liability? One incident, one allergy, one complaint, and the entire chain's exposed." "He was hungry," she said quietly. "And you're not a charity," Arnold snapped. "You're an employee. One more violation, and I'll have no choice but to terminate." Outside the door, a server dropped a glass. The shatter echoed like a warning bell. Eleanor stared at him, unmoving. Then, without a word, she reached into her apron and pulled out a crumpled envelope. Inside were torn bills, singles, fives, scraped together from a week of tips. She dropped it on the desk. "There," she said, "that should cover the rest of the week." Arnold didn't look at the money. He just shook his head slowly. "You think this makes you noble, but in this world, good intentions don't pay rent. They get people fired." He stood, straightening his blazer like a badge of conquest. "This ends today. I don't care who that boy is." He walked out without another word. Eleanor sat in the chair for a long time, her eyes burning, hands clenched. The air in the office felt colder now, more clinical, like kindness had been surgically removed. That night she didn't sleep. She sat by the window of her apartment, the radiator rattling faintly behind her. She thought about her brother, about the nights she used to sneak cafeteria rolls into her bag so he wouldn't go to bed hungry. She remembered how no one ever asked why 2 teenagers lived alone, just judged the crumbs left behind. The next morning, Elena still showed up at 5:57 a.m., still tied her apron, still poured the coffee, still filled booth 6 with Isaac's usual plate of pancakes, even though he hadn't been back in 2 days. Because some routines aren't about habit, they're about defiance, and Elena Brooks wasn't finished yet. The morning sky bled crimson behind the rooftops of Maple Ridge, casting a strange, almost prophetic glow across the cracked sidewalk outside the Junction Café. Elena stood at the grill, flipping pancakes with the focus of a surgeon, her jaw tight, her movements sharper than usual. She hadn't seen Isaac in 3 days. 3 plates had gone untouched. Each one hurt more than the last. Sandra hovered by the register, her eyes darting from Elena to the door every few minutes, clearly waiting for the inevitable fallout from Arnold's visit. The regulars, those who once rolled their eyes at Elena's silent generosity, now avoided her gaze altogether. The diner buzzed low with conversations and clinking silverware, but the mood was heavier than usual. Elena placed a warm plate at booth 6 once again, pancakes, a few apple slices on the side. She didn't know why she kept doing it. Maybe hope was just another kind of muscle memory. She was halfway through pouring black coffee into Harold's chipped mug when the bell above the front door rang. Not its usual jingle, but a sharp final note, like the downbeat of a song that hadn't started yet. The diner went quiet. All heads turned. 4 sleek black SUVs pulled into the parking lot, the kind you only saw in movies or nightmares. They parked in a semicircle, their tinted windows reflecting the sunlight like obsidian mirrors. Doors opened in unison. Men in suits stepped out, followed by 2 in military dress blues. And then he stepped out. A tall black man in a custom navy suit. Broad shoulders, quiet authority in every step. His presence alone silenced the clatter of forks and the shuffle of feet. He pushed open the diner door. The bell rang again, this time almost reverently. Sandra nearly dropped her tablet. Elena froze, still holding the coffee pot. "I'm looking for Elena Brooks," the man said. His voice was calm but carried like thunder through the still air. I'm Elena," she replied, her voice barely audible. He smiled gently and extended his hand. "Malcolm Jordan, Chief Executive Officer of Jordan Aerospace Technologies." The name dropped like a bomb. Someone near the counter gasped. Another whispered, "Wait, the Malcolm Jordan." Malcolm continued, "I'm here because of a boy. Isaac Thompson, the one you've been feeding for the past few months." Elena blinked. Her mind couldn't keep up. Is he all right?" "He's safe now," Malcolm said. "He's with family, but for weeks he was living in silence, alone, grieving, scared to ask for help. And somehow, in the middle of all that, you saw him. You fed him. You gave him something no system, no shelter, no official could. Normalcy." He reached into the inside pocket of his blazer and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Carefully, he handed it to her. It was a letter, crumpled a little, clearly written by a child. "Dear Miss Elena, you don't know my name, but you helped me more than anyone ever has. My dad said not all heroes wear capes. I think sometimes they wear aprons. Thank you for not making me feel like a problem. Just a kid. I hope you get something good, too." Isaac T. Elena stood frozen. Her hands trembled. "You gave my godson hope," Malcolm said, "and that means more than you'll ever know. I read that letter at my board meeting, not a dry eye in the room." He paused, then added, "I'd like to offer you a position on my foundation's new program, Project Mornings. We're building a national network to quietly support children of fallen servicemen, and we need people like you, people who act without expecting applause." The entire diner had gone silent. Every eye was on Elena, but this time no one mocked, no one sneered. Even Sandra had tears brimming. Elena finally spoke, her voice breaking. I couldn't let him go hungry." Malcolm nodded. "And because of that, you didn't just change one life, you honored another." Outside, the sun broke fully across the horizon. Inside, Elena Brooks, waitress, caretaker, invisible woman, was finally seen. Elena stood frozen, Isaac's letter still trembling in her hands. Around her, the diner remained silent, chairs squeaking as customers slowly turned, stunned into stillness, unsure whether they were witnessing a miracle, a reckoning, or both. Malcolm Jordan didn't rush. He waited for her breathing to steady before continuing. "Isaac Thompson is the son of Captain James Thompson, one of my oldest friends and one of the finest pilots the US military has ever trained. James was killed in action during a covert mission in northern Syria almost 4 months ago." A murmur rippled through the diner like the low rumble before a storm. Forks lowered, eyes widened. Elena clutched the counter for support. "He never said anything," she whispered. "He just came in, every day with his book and his silence." Malcolm nodded. He didn't want to draw attention. Isaac's mother, James's wife, suffered a mental breakdown after the funeral. She disappeared 2 weeks later, abandoning Isaac without a word. No note, no goodbye. The words landed like falling bricks. Isaac stayed in the house alone, managed to stretch out the emergency fund his father left him, $300 in a locked tin, and made it last for weeks. He walked himself to school, washed his clothes in the bathtub, and kept his father's disappearance a secret. Told no one. Not teachers, not neighbors, not even me. Elena blinked, tears stinging behind her eyes. He was just a boy. Malcolm's voice was steady, but there was steel beneath it. He was a soldier's son, and he was terrified. He knew if the truth came out, he'd be taken, put in the system, separated from what was left of his father's memory. He didn't want that, so he did what he thought he had to do. He turned and gestured toward the booth, the one Isaac had sat in every morning at precisely 7:10 a.m. This place, Malcolm said, his voice quieting with reverence, was his refuge. And you were his anchor. You didn't treat him like a problem. You didn't ask him to explain. You just fed him. That made all the difference. Elena shook her head slowly. I thought maybe his parents were just busy, or he liked being alone. I didn't know. No one did, Malcolm replied, but you acted anyway. That's what makes what you did extraordinary. He reached into his coat again, pulling out another envelope, larger, heavier. This, he said, handing it to her, is a statement from the Department of Defense. It confirms Captain Thompson's service and sacrifice, and it contains something else. Elena opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a folded American flag pin, a certification of honor from the Joint Special Operations Command, and a check. She blinked, her breath catching in her throat. $50,000, she gasped. It's not charity, Malcolm said quickly. It's recognition. You provided essential emotional support to a child of a fallen service member, support that likely saved his life. Our foundation believes that should be honored, just like we'd honor a battlefield medic. Behind them, a table of elderly veterans stood to their feet, eyes misted. One of them removed his cap and pressed it to his chest. Elena looked around, overwhelmed. The same people who had once whispered behind her back were now staring in awe. For years, she'd been invisible. Now, the truth of who Isaac was and what she had unknowingly protected had shifted the ground beneath her feet. Where is he now? She asked softly. Colorado, Malcolm said, with his grandparents, healing. But he talks about you constantly. Said you made him feel human again. Elena closed her eyes for a moment, then she looked at Malcolm and said with quiet conviction, if he ever needs a place to come back to, this booth will always be his. Malcolm smiled. He already knows. The news of what happened that morning spread faster than any breakfast special the Junction Café had ever served. By noon, the diner's phone rang off the hook. Local news stations, veterans groups, military spouses, even strangers asking how they could help. But Elena wasn't chasing headlines. She was still standing in the center of the storm, trying to understand how a boy with a book and a hunger he never voiced had rewritten the trajectory of her life. Malcolm had left, but not before shaking the hand of every employee in the building and thanking the cooks for keeping Isaac's pancakes warm all those mornings. As he stepped into the SUV, he turned to Elena and said, "We'll be in touch soon. We're just getting started." 2 days later, an official announcement came from Jordan Aerospace Technologies and the Captain Thompson Memorial Foundation. A new initiative, Project Mornings, would launch in Elena's honor, designed to support children of fallen service members through quiet, direct intervention. No red tape, no wait lists, just food, care, and consistency. And at the very heart of it, they wanted Elena Brooks to lead it. Not as a symbol, as the architect. I'm not a foundation-type person, Elena had said nervously on the call with Malcolm's board. I didn't go to college. I don't have credentials. You have something better, Malcolm replied. Instinct, empathy, courage when no one's watching. Credentials didn't feed Isaac. You did. The following week, Elena gave her notice at the junction. Mark, the diner owner, didn't argue. He just nodded, then reached beneath the counter and handed her something wrapped in a brown paper bag. It was Isaac's plate, the same ceramic one she'd used every morning, marked with a tiny chip in the rim. Mark had scrubbed it clean, wrapped it carefully, and said, "You might need it where you're going." She nearly cried again, Before she left town, Elena sat in booth 6-1 last time. The seat was warmer than she expected, as if the boy's memory still lingered there. She placed the plate on the table, folded her apron beside it, and looked out the window at the maple trees shedding their color like they knew it was time for change. When she stepped outside, a crowd had gathered. Neighbors, teachers, old veterans in worn jackets, even a few former skeptics from the diner. A local third-grade class had made a banner that read, "Thank you, Miss Elena, for seeing what others missed." It hit her then. For so long she had gone unseen. She had lived in the margins, making do, fading quietly into the background. And yet, in the smallest of ways, she had made a dent in the world. And the world had turned to face her back. Weeks passed. Elena relocated to Chicago, where the foundation set up their first Project Mornings pilot site. She worked hands-on with children, trained volunteers, and developed a network of local cafes willing to partner. The program wasn't loud, it wasn't flashy. It was pancakes served without questions, milk poured without paperwork, kindness given without a clipboard. And on the first morning of launch, a surprise package arrived at her new office. Inside, a small drawing from Isaac. It showed a simple booth, a woman with a green apron and a boy with a book. Above them, written in large block letters, "I'm okay. I hope you are too." Taped to the back was a folded post-it note, "P.S. Grandma makes decent pancakes, but not yours." Elena placed the drawing on her desk beside a framed copy of Isaac's original letter. She glanced out the window at the sunrise, painting the city gold, and whispered, "Yeah, I think I finally am." For the first time in years, Elena Brooks didn't feel like she was just surviving. She felt like she had truly arrived. Some life-changing stories don't begin with a dramatic moment or a sweeping gesture. They begin quietly, with a simple plate of pancakes, a silent child, and a woman who refused to look away. Elena Brooks never set out to be a hero. She wasn't trying to build a legacy. She was trying to survive. One double shift, one tip jar, one breath at a time. Her own life had been filled with loss, hardship, and the kind of silence that leaves bruises on the soul. So when she saw that same silence in the eyes of a young boy sitting alone at the back of a diner, she recognized it. And instead of asking questions, she brought him breakfast. In that small act, something extraordinary happened. Because kindness, real kindness, doesn't require permission. It doesn't ask for credit. It shows up, especially when no one else will. And often, it's in those moments that lives are saved, not with sirens or headlines, but with quiet constancy. A glass of water, a warm meal, a smile that says, "You're not invisible here." The story of Elena and Isaac reminds us that the people who need us most won't always ask. They may not have the words. They may not even believe they deserve help. But when we meet their silence with compassion, not pity, not charity, but dignity, we break the cycle of isolation that holds so many captive. And what Elena did wasn't grand. She didn't give him a home. She didn't fix the system. She didn't wear a uniform or a badge. She simply made room for him. And that room, those 40 minutes each morning, became a lifeline for a boy who was hanging on by threads. That's the lesson, that sometimes it's not about changing the world all at once. It's about choosing to see the people the world ignores. It's about remembering that hunger isn't always about food, and that loneliness is often louder than words. We live in a culture that often celebrates noise, speed, and spectacle. But the truth is, some of the most important battles are fought in quiet places. Over diner counters, in the back corners of classrooms, in break rooms and buses and public parks. And the soldiers who fight them don't always look the way we expect. Elena didn't need a cape to be a hero. She needed an apron and the willingness to see someone no one else did. And when she gave what little she had, the universe gave back in ways she never could have imagined. Her story didn't just change Isaac's future. It changed how an entire town saw compassion. It shifted a corporate mindset. It launched a national movement. All because one woman decided not to look away. So what's the takeaway? Never underestimate the power of showing up, of staying soft in a world that tells you to be hard, of asking nothing and giving anyway, because you never know when the child you're feeding might be carrying the weight of a fallen soldier's legacy. And you never know when the smallest kindness will echo loudest in someone's life. In the end, Elena Brooks didn't just feed a hungry boy. She restored his dignity, she honored his father, and she reminded the rest of us that love, in its purest form, is simple. It sees, it feeds, it stays, even when no one's watching. Especially then, if this story moved you, if Eleanor's quiet courage and Isaac's silent strength reminded you of the kind of world we all want to live in, then you're in the right place. Because here on the X Daily Stories channel, we bring you true-to-life tales of justice, resilience, and humanity. Stories that aren't just told, but felt. Stories like this one, where a simple act, just a plate of pancakes, becomes the spark that changes everything. So if you believe that kindness matters, that unseen people deserve to be seen, and that small choices can leave a lasting impact, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We're dropping powerful cinematic stories every single week, crafted to inspire, challenge, and move you. Comment below. Have you ever helped someone quietly, expecting nothing in return? We'd love to hear your story. And remember, no one is ever truly invisible. If someone dares to look, see you in the next one.